Hi everyone, thanks for joining me. You're watching In Deep on the Delta. Today we're going to be talking about fishing Rock and Tullie Bank. If you've been out here much, you know that there are hundreds of miles of banks that are lined with rock, Tullie rock, so on, so forth. Most of it is productive, but I'm going to tell you right away that there's some of it that's more productive than other areas. So today we're going to give you the information so you can come out here and be informed on maybe how to pick these banks apart, where to look, maybe where to fly by. And a lot of these banks I call flyby banks because a lot of people that are fishing out here, they're looking for flooded islands, they're looking for Tullie islands, they're looking for flats, different types of structure, and they fly right by a lot of these banks. Today we're going to be talking about how to find specific targets on these banks and what to look for as you're flying by these things and you're watching, you see some spots that you think maybe I want to stop at. We're going to show you why and when you're going to want to stop at those particular banks. You know that I talk about the 3 T's out here: tides, timing, and targets. Today we're talking about targets. Let's get into it. We've pulled up on a bank here, and this is a really likely looking bank that I would fish. We've got some transitional zones here, and what we're going to do is we're going to break down just about a 50 or 75 feet of bank, and we're going to talk about the targets that are within this one little area. Now I'll start by saying, when you come out here and you're looking at a straight bank that runs for a mile and it doesn't have a Tullie on it, it's just that rock, it's straight, there's nothing to hold fish on there, I want you to fly by those areas for now. Those long straight banks like that I'll fish in the wintertime, but in the summer I'm looking for what we have in front of us: rock, Tullie rock, so on and so forth. So what I want you to do is fly down the river, and when you get into one of these areas where you see these Tullie clumps that are dispersed with rock in between them, it could be 5 feet of rock, it could be 20 feet of rock, it could be 50 feet of rock. That's where I want you to stop and start looking at these areas. Start by talking about the makeup of just this 50 feet of bank in here. We have Tullie, we have 30 feet of rock, and then we have more Tullie right over here. I hope you guys can see everything that I'm talking about. So we have 2 transition zones. We have a transition from Tullie to rock here, and then as we come down the rock, we have a transition zone from rock back to Tullies. In each one of these transition zones, I call them pockets. Now, one pocket right in here, we'll get a little circle around that pocket. If you can't see this, we're going to move this over here. We've got another pocket right here. I'll put a circle around that pocket. Those are two prime spots. Now, within these pockets, there's going to be what I call a closet. And a closet is a small area in the pocket where the fish may sit. And a lot of times, everyone that comes by here will fish these transitions. They'll fish the pockets, but they won't knock on the closet doors that are tucked into these pockets. It'll make more sense what I'm talking about here in just a minute. And I also want to say that these pockets will fish differently on an incoming tide or an outgoing tide. For instance, this pocket right in front of us, and I think you could see it's got a little bit of floating vegetation on top of it. If the tide was moving this way, say coming in, that pocket would be protected from the tide, and the fish could sit in there, and they can be out of the tide and just basically use that as an ambush zone coming out into the current, which may be bringing different types of food source down the bank as the tide starts moving. Now, if that tide was moving the same way in this little pocket right here, this pocket would have tide punching into it. There could be fish on this pocket, and they could be sitting in here just waiting for, again, the tide to be pushing into here. So there's going to be a lot of crayfish in here. There's going to be a lot of bluegill in here, and those are going to be the 2 primary sources of food that we're trying to imitate when we're fishing out here. First question a lot of people ask: should I be running with the tide or should I be running against the tide? There's no right way to fish an area like this. There's no wrong way to fish it. It's going to be your local knowledge after you fish this one little area a few times and you've caught some fish to know, you know what, on a incoming tide that's coming in here, those fish really like to stack up right in that pocket and get out of the current. Now, the thing of it is, you got to come out here and fish these areas, and let's just say you get lucky and catch a fish or get a couple of bites in here. It's going to give you that confidence to come back, and as you come back to this little area 3 or 4 times, you're going to start to see patterns form to where the fish hold at certain tides. This could be also a bank that you want to fish at high tide. It could be a bank that you want to fish at low tide. This may be an early morning bank or an evening bank. As the sun pulls up and it goes over and sets, you're going to have shade on this bank. Does the bank have shade on it or sun? Think about that, and think about it in regards when you're thinking about your day of fishing. What sloughs run north and south? What sloughs run east and west? And when you're going to be out there, you're going to be out there in the morning, you're going to be out there in the afternoon. And think about any time that there is a shade line on these banks, especially in the summer, that is one more target area. And when we see shade, if you have 6 inches of shade, that's great. If you have 2 feet of shade, that's great also. But you are not going to be able to throw 4 feet off of the Tullies and catch the fish that are in the shade. You have to put that bait in the shade. So if it's a 6-inch shade line that's right up against the Tullies, you've got to throw your worm, your jig, whatever you're throwing, right up into that shade and let it get down there. That would be a prime spot, especially on a hot summer day. Another prime spot would be this pocket up here where we have this vegetation, and maybe I'll pull up there as we're going by, and I'll show you just what I'm talking about if you can't see that surface vegetation. Any surface vegetation that's matted up on the surface that's creating shade is also another prime target that you want to fish. And by the way, it's pretty much low tide, so you can look at this bank and think about what it looks like when we have a higher tide. When the water's up 2 or 3 feet, you can really see where these pockets will develop. So we're talking about this pocket right back in here. As you go by it, and you guys know what I'm talking about, especially if there's 2 guys fishing in a boat, it's hard for the first guy to come in if you're coming this way and try to wrap around and fish inside that pocket. It's easier if the boat's coming down here and it's down the bank a little bit to fish this pocket. So one thing I'm going to throw in for you tournament guys and your partners, if you're coming down the bank and you're on the trolling motor, maybe it's a good idea to let your buddy fish that pocket there as we go by. As you pull up, you're going to fish this pocket because you can fish in front of the boat. Now what generally happens, the guy in the front of the boat sees that and he wants to get in there and get a cast in there, but all he's doing is getting a cast that he's dragging a lure through, and it's not really fishing effectively. And you know what, it's probably better if I demonstrate right here. If I was fishing this bank going this way and I'm trying to wrap around into here, I can't get into there real good because we've got Tullies and everything else. You almost have to let the boat drift by and then cast back into that area. It would be better for me from here to hit that pocket up there, and as the boat goes by, let my partner pitch it in behind the boat. That way I can get a good clean angle, and angles are very important when you come to fishing these areas, because I can get a shot up here and I could let that worm or jig soak and maybe pull the fish out of there rather than try to get in here, maybe not get a good cast, foul up the area, and then by the time I get up there I don't have the proper angle. So angles are real important when it comes to fishing this type of stuff. Now let's talk about what I call a closet. These are areas here where you can throw a worm in, you can throw a topwater bait, you can throw jigs. If you've got enough clear water, you can throw a crankbait in the trough. You can throw spinner baits in here. The problem is if you have let's say a whopper plopper, you throw it right up on the rock and you pull it right through here, it's not going to attract the fish they're in real close to the Tullies that are not aggressive. So this is where we're looking at fishing closets. And inside these little transitional zones, which we call pockets, there's apt to be a fish that's tucked way in there, and that's what I call a closet. If you throw anything on the outside, a spinnerbait, a crankbait, a whopper plopper, whatever it is, it's 4 feet out from that closet, that fish isn't coming out. As you go by, that's when you're going to have to pick up a jig or a punch rod or a worm, whatever you can get in there, and throw it right inside that closet. When these fish are locked in tight, they're in there, they're next to the Tullies, they've got surface vegetation over the top of them, they may have some subsurface vegetation, they're sitting in there, they're not moving, they're not active, they're not going to hit those other baits that we just talked about. But if you can get that jig or worm to fall right into their closet, that's their protection zone. They don't have to be hungry to eat it. It's going to fall on their head and they're going to grab that thing. And we all know how that bite takes place here on the California Delta. That is the essence of fishing this body of water. When you can get a bait into these little places that no one would ever think a fish is in there, and all of a sudden there's just a boil, and that's a 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pound fish, you set hook on them, that's what the Delta is about. As I'm talking to you right now, I'm going to pull this camera around and I'm going to show you an exact closet that's tucked into a pocket. We're going to go right back here because this is a great place. As you see that, you've got down Tullies, you've got shade, you've got a little pocket in there. You've got to get your baits into that pocket, and not only into that pocket, but deep into that pocket, into the closet. We're coming around here, and you can see all these little targets right in here. This is just bonus coverage, man. You guys are getting it today. And then we're back to this little transition zone here. After that little tangent there, I think you guys get the idea of what we're talking about here. We've got to look for the targets within the zones. Think about the time of day that you're out here. Think about which way the tide is moving. Think about your angles. Angles are so important. As you're moving down the river, you want to always be pitching ahead of your boat. You don't want to be dragging stuff behind your boat. So when there's two guys, especially if you're tournament partners, get to know each other and share the areas and make sure that the guy in the front of the boat is hitting the prime targets with the prime bait at the prime angle, and leave some of those areas that look good to the guy in the back of the boat, and maybe say something. Hey, I'm passing this spot up here. There's an inlet here. I want a little divot in here. I want you to hit that as we go by. I'm not hitting it. That's how you should work as a team out here. But as just closing up, think about the tides. Think about where the shade's going to be. Think about, is this going to be a better bank to be here on an incoming tide or an outgoing tide? And I think you guys already know this, but this is just kind of a reminder that don't fly by these areas. Pick them apart 50 feet at a time. Get in and learn small sections of bank. Once you know the small section of bank, then you can go down the entire bank and say, okay, this is the same bank we fished 50 yards up the river, and the fish were all holding in this pocket, or the fish were holding on this piece of rock, or they were holding outside or inside of the trough. Things like that are how you put patterns together, and it does take some local knowledge and just some time and effort on the water, but these are the areas that you don't want to fly by. Give them a try. Hit them up, fish them with worms, fish them with jigs, fish them with topwaters, fish them with crankbaits, spinnerbaits, chatterbaits, all the normal stuff. You'll catch fish out here. Thank you guys for watching. Come out, catch some fish, send me a report, take a picture of that big fish you catch out here and say, Steve, I caught this right in the pocket. He wasn't only in the pocket, he was in that closet, and I pulled him out of the closet. Well, we're not even going to touch that. Anyhow, that's fishing, bank, and Tullie. Thanks for watching. We'll see you guys on the river. Bye-bye.